Okay, so what is webmetrics? And sorry, it's me again. It's an hour of me, but you can walk out if you want to. But I'm going to outdo the previous speaker by offering 4 copies of Introduction to Webmetrics. So if you stay awake, optimistically if 4 people stay awake, after a full hour of me droning on, then you can have a free book each. And just to pluck it quickly, it really is an introductory book on webmetrics, including link analysis, and so it's aimed at getting you quickly into using webmetrics for your own research topics. Okay, so what is webmetrics? Well, it's link analysis plus a lot of other techniques. So it's a broader range of techniques than just link analysis. And the common thing for webmetrics is it's gathering data on the web and measuring aspects of the web. So it might be measuring websites, web pages, hyperlinks, search engine results, YouTube video commenter networks, MySpace friend networks. If it's on the web and there's a way of measuring it, kind of counting things, then it's likely to be webmetrics, or it could be webmetrics. And webmetrics is doing this kind of stuff for social science purposes. So it's counting things on the web for social science purposes is really the bottom line for webmetrics. So webmetrics can be applied, as for link analysis, for 2 types of phenomena that are on the web. So if you're interested in measuring something that is already a web phenomenon, then webmetrics is definitely for you. So it could be about website interlinking or topics that are frequently blogged about. Or it could be to look at old problems that are not directly related to the web, but have some reflection online. So have some reflection on the web. So it could be that you're interested in international communication, inter-university collaboration, university business collaboration, or the impact or spread of ideas. And there's even been one study on the spread of jokes on the internet. So it can be things that aren't really to do with the internet, but are reflected on the internet, and the internet is just a convenient way of accessing relevant data. Okay, so I'm going to show you my favorite graph of my own anyway. So this is a graph of the volume of blogging about the Danish cartoons debate of a few years ago. So this graph, I'll show you how to produce this graph in a sec. In fact, I'll tell you now. So you go to blogpost.com, which is a blog search engine, and you just type in keywords for a topic of interest. So it's like Google, but it just searches blogs. And then when you get your results, you click on the Trend This button, and it will produce a graph of the number of results every day over the past 6 months. So you see what are the trends in the topic that you're interested in. So my claim about this is it's the only source of information about some key social science, particularly political and news-related issues. The only source of evidence is this type of search engine. So this graph, to explain this point, this graph is the volume of blogging about the Danish cartoons. I'm sure I hope you all remember the Danish cartoons affair. And this graph clearly shows that the interest in the Danish cartoons started on the 23rd of January 2006 and quickly blew up into, I think it was the second biggest news story of the year, according to the BBC, in about a week, and then gradually died away. So this graph was produced at the end of May 2006. So at the end of May 2006, we could pinpoint to the exact date when the Danish Cartoon Affairs became an international event. And I think on the end of May, there's no other way you could have calculated when was the date when this took off and become a big news story. So a little bit of context. Does anyone remember when the Danish cartoons were initially published? So it was the 30th, no Danish people here, the 30th of September 2005. So it was 4 months before it became an international incident. So the cartoons were published, and then in the blogosphere, in blogs, there was 4 months of nothing, virtually nothing. And then suddenly, out of virtually nothing, the second biggest news story of the year. And this graph really clearly shows that there really was nothing. And I think if you ask people at the end of May, when did you know that the Danish cartoons were going to be an international affair? I think that virtually everyone, myself included, would say, well, I heard that they were published and I knew, okay, this is going to be big. And this graph tells you that's really not true. It was 4 months after the publication before anyone started to take, well, I only found one blog before the 23rd of January in which someone said this is going to be a big news story. One blog. So this is the only source of retrospective public opinion, hard evidence for retrospective public opinion about a debate. So if you want public opinion about topics in the past, or how much interest the public has about a topic in the past, you just can't have it unless you look at blogs or some similar social media, or you're lucky and that there's been a relevant question in a periodic periodic survey, social survey. So I think this is fantastic. And you can use it in like a minute. Just blogpulse.com, type in your keywords, and you get a nice graph. So here's another example. So this is Blog Pulse about a month ago. Search for ash cloud. So blogs mentioning ash cloud. So you can really see that virtually no discussion about ash cloud, and probably all of it irrelevant until mid-April, and then astronomical. So this was overnight major international news topic, the ash cloud. And you can see it dying down. And inset in there is the equivalent data from Google. So Google will tell you how many people search for any particular keyword or phrase. So that's www.google.com/trends if you want that. And then you get a graph like this for whatever keyword you type in. So you can see that the volume of searching for ash cloud pretty much mirrored the volume of blogging for ash cloud in this case. So it's kind of a second opinion on the interest in the topic. And this is a same source, but this is the volume of blogging about the three leaders of the main three British political parties around the elections. And you can really see the Nick Clegg effect. And but then Nick Clegg and Gordon Brown dying away after the election, and David Cameron triumphant at the end. So again, this is retrospective. So this was produced at the beginning of June and covers a 6-month period, daily indicator of interest in the three leaders. So this is just simple keyword matching now. So you do sometimes have to be careful with this. So there's probably a lot of other Gordon Browns that get blogged about occasionally. So the Gordon Brown's probably a bit of an overestimate compared to David Cameron and Nick Clegg. Oh, and the other good thing about this is you can look at the spikes on this graph, in Blog Pulse and click on them, and it takes you to a list of blog postings from that day. So you can say, well, why was that spike there? Click on it and read 20 or so blog posts, and you say, okay, well, they were mostly discussing, I don't know, Bigotgate or whatever. So you can have the evidence to back up the reason for the spike being there. So it's really, I think, a good overview of any topic. Plus you get the ability to dig into the data to see what are people really saying about it. So I think this is really a fantastic resource for anyone interested in public opinion. Free resource, easy to use, perfect. How long have I got left? 15, okay, great. So I'll just show you an example of a kind of a more complex version of the same thing. So this is a way you can kind of take the blog post graph one step further. So this is our own software, which does essentially the same as Blog Pulse, but a little bit more. We developed it in parallel with Blog Pulse. So when we finished this software a few years ago, we were proudly showing everyone, look, we've got this fantastic software. And someone put their hand up and said, there's one like that that's free online. And I didn't know, I'm gutted. But it does a little bit more, actually. So what it will do is it will look through every word posted on every day for the number of years that we've collected the data, which is 6 years now. So look at every word on every day in every blog that we've gathered, about 100,000 over 6 years, and it will automatically plot a graph like this of the frequency of blogging for that word, and then it will automatically pick out the graphs with the biggest spikes in them. So a graph with a spike in corresponds to some kind of event of interest. So we're able to automatically identify all the events of interest in the blogosphere over the past 6 years. And we're also able to drill down to pick out the events of interest for any particular broad theme or topic. So this was part of a project that was interested in public fears about science. So we set up a query to get just blog posts that discussed science and expressed some kind of worry or concern. And then we got the program to go through all the words and pick out the graphs with the biggest spike in and present these graphs to us. And this is an example of one of these graphs. So the program itself automatically identified the word Schiavo as related to a public fear of science, and then printed out this little graph to show that Schiavo became an issue in 2005, March 2005, and then went away again. So non-Americans are now looking at bemused. So this was a political issue in the States in 2005 about whether, I think in California, whether the life support machine of Terry Schiavo should have been switched off or not. And it's got scientists and medical people involved, and there's a lot of worry about it. But this was part of a project to try and automatically identify if there were any areas of science that the public were worried about in advance of these getting into the press. And this was motivated by the GM food crisis and the stem cell research crisis. So this is kind of, I like to think of this as kind of looking for a needle in a haystack, because we're looking for the few blog posts that represent something significant, but the computer is actually automatically looking. So it's like looking for a needle in a haystack with a very powerful magnet, which is able to find the needles without actually a human having to go through every single strand of hay. Okay, so this is one you can't do quite so easily as the blogpulse.com. So I think I'll skip this since everyone's still here from the link analysis. So I think there are a couple of people who weren't here for the link analysis, so this is just a quick summary of what you can do with a link analysis, a different type of diagram. So this was a study of the connections between universities in Europe. And so for this diagram we took 42 countries in Europe, and we calculated the links between all the universities in all 42 countries in Europe. And in the diagram we've kept only the countries that have the most international linking with their universities, and we've thrown the rest away. And then the thickness of the arrow in this diagram is proportional to not quite the number of links between the source and the target country, but the number of links between the source and target country normalized for the total amount of linking for that country. So the UK really dominates, and Germany to a lesser extent really dominates Europe in terms of the total number of links, but the way we've normalized means that you get thick lines where there are disproportionately many links. So you get a very strong Scandinavian cluster. And most of the strong connections between universities in Europe, at least on the web, are geopolitical. So it's countries which speak the same language or are next to each other. So, so for the people in charge of the EU research, this is a bit disappointing, because their goal is to have a completely integrated EU research area where there are no real international borders, and this is saying there's really a strong geographical influence and language influence within Europe. But we'll do this kind of graph periodically, and then we'll look for differences to see if the degree of regionalism that currently exists in European research is going away or not. Okay. Okay, so I'll go on to a little bit about analysing social network sites. So some webmetrics research, so we've looked at blogs, we've looked at link analysis, and another type of webmetric research is looking at individual types of sites like social network sites or YouTube. So this is a graph of data from MySpace. So MySpace allows you to get the data on about a third of members. As a researcher, you can access data on about a third of members in MySpace, those who choose to have a completely public personal profile. You can access their data, and then you can produce information about who are the typical users of MySpace. So this is a graph of the age profiles of MySpace members. So it's from a sample of, I think, about 30,000 MySpace members, and you can see from the graph that the peak age is 16 for MySpace, and there's quite a significant difference between females and males. There's a slight female majority for membership, but there's a much bigger female majority for younger members of MySpace. So if you're young and you join MySpace, you're much more likely to be female than if you're old and you join MySpace, which is quite interesting. There's a really strange gender thing going on with MySpace in particular. I don't know if it's true in Facebook, but yes, but there's a lot of women seem to be much better at using MySpace as a social network site and to be more willing to use MySpace. So anyway, so this is an example of getting large amounts of data from the web and producing nice summary statistics. And this is my favourite summary statistic from MySpace. So we did a study of the language used in on the home pages of MySpace members to study the amount of swearing that there was in MySpace. And we looked for gender differences in strong swearing. And I have to boast, and this is another boast, I'm sorry, but this is the world's largest ever study of swearing, as far as I'm aware. And it's only possible because once you've written a program to download data from the web, you can just get huge quantities very quickly. So there's very little extra effort to get 10,000 than to get 1,000 or 100. So we can really get really big samples. Anyway, so the study showed that men swear more than women for strong swearing in the US, which every study of swearing before has always shown. But in the UK, women and men swear about the same amount for strong swearing. And all previous studies have shown that in the UK, men swear more than women for strong swearing. So I'm quite proud of that. So yes, a non-web research into swearing typically has a sample size of about 20 to 148, and we have tens of thousands for this. So do you want to see examples of the swearing you see in MySpace? If not, close your eyes. Can you read that? So this is... So there are official linguistic categories for swearing. There are 9 different ways you can swear from a linguistic perspective. And this is the 3 categories that essentially are using swearing to emphasize what you say.
The English or the American?
Oh, I think these are mostly English.
Men or women?
Both.
They must speak English because Americans would never say mid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't say it without spelling it. Sorted that problem out.
So it was interesting. We did quite a bit of study of swearing on MySpace, and one of the other facts was that 99.5% of swearing wasn't in an offensive context. So only 1 in every 200 uses of swearing in MySpace was intended to insult someone or offend someone. So, I mean, intend to offensively insult someone. So a lot of swearing was in the form of an insult, but was clearly intended as like a friendly banter between people.
Is that strong or moderate or very strong? Which category is that?
These are all strong.
I hate to say they're very strong.
Okay. So there's more in the book if you... Okay, so onto a different site, YouTube. So YouTube is another site which is really widely used. And if you become a member of YouTube, then you have to enter some basic information like MySpace, like age, gender, country of origin, stuff like this. And so you can access this as a researcher, this kind of information as a researcher, and find out what's the age breakdown of people who look at a particular video or in a particular network. So this is just a big collection, a random collection of YouTube users, and it's illustrates the range of ages for YouTube users typically. So there's I think a peak of late 20s for YouTube use. So the disadvantage of this is it's self-reported age, and the little peak at the end are people telling porkies, people lying. But the advantage is you can get a genuine random sample from a lot of these sites, so you don't have most sources of sample bias in social science research. Particularly in MySpace, you can get genuine a random sample with a random number generator because everyone has a number. So there are ways of getting essentially perfect random samples from MySpace, which is fantastic. So this is something else from YouTube, which you can get automatically with the LexURL software, which is free on the web and is primarily used for link analysis, but it can also produce friend networks or commenter networks for YouTube videos. So this was produced for a project looking at people who posted videos in response to the fitna video of a few years ago. So we produced a network showing the connections, the friend connections or the subscriber connections between people who posted a video response to fitna or who posted a comment on a video response to fitna. So, so I really like this project because we got all this data automatically with the software. So it didn't take much human effort, and the project that was originally designed to produce these diagrams had already decided they were going to produce this diagram, but we're going to spend a month with a human collecting the data from YouTube, and we were able to do it with the program without spending a month. And also, bizarrely, you can actually get more information from YouTube with a program than you can as a human. So if you're a human, they won't tell you people's gender, but if you're a program, they will tell you people's gender, which is really odd. I'm sure YouTube don't actually realise that, and that was important for this project. So we were able to identify that a key group of commenters and video posters were female, which was important for this particular project.
Wait, sorry, can I just ask, which ones are the guys and which ones are the girls?
Oh, and there's no gender information on these.
Okay.
So the blue ones are all part of one big connected network, and the red ones are part of smaller networks.
I'm confused by some of the names compared to the...
Yes, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we do have gender information, I just haven't put it on here. So if you imagine you're studying something as awkward as I think it was 15,000 people that posted a video in response to Fitna or commented on a video, then it's really nice to have a diagram like this to kind of summarize the core of the network and give you something to start your analysis from. Okay, so this is another type of web metrics. This is TechSpace Webmatrix. So you can do surprisingly interesting things just by trying to identify which websites mention a key term, how many websites mention a key term, and where they are in the world, and what other terms are mentioned by those websites. So this diagram is part of a project into integrated water resource management, which is a United Nations initiative to try and minimize international conflict over water resources, which is actually not in Europe, but outside Europe is really a major issue, a life and death issue for huge numbers of people. So we identified which web pages, how many web pages there were that mentioned integrated water resource management by doing loads of Google searches through the LexURL software, and then where in the world they came from, and also we did an automatic analysis to see which terms were mentioned in web pages that mentioned integrated water resource management. So what were the key issues on the web that were associated with integrated water resource management? And this shows some of them either mentioned in web pages, the light blue, or in PDF documents, which tend to be more formal government reports or academic reports in the red. So the words at the bottom: agenda, development, environment, environmental, water, international, council, world, Europe, and new was a bit of a bizarre one, were the words that occurred most frequently in documents discussing integrated water resource management. So this was kind of a way of getting insights, simple insights, very broad insights into what the main themes were on the web when integrated water resource management was discussed. Okay, and we can also do a very simple counting of how many web pages mention these terms, which sounds not very useful, but in some contexts it can be useful. So for Nesta, they give us every 6 months they give us a list of all the reports that they publish, and they ask us to count how many times all these reports are mentioned on the web, and that's their proxy for impact of those reports. So it's kind of a little bit like citation counting for academics, but for Nesta they don't get academic citations so much, so they want to just know how many times they get discussed or mentioned. And it works reasonably well for them, I think. Okay, so I'll just mention quickly the data gathering or processing tools. So I've mentioned blogpost.com, which is free, fantastic. LexURL Searcher, which is also free, and I can't say it's fantastic because it's mine, but it's fairly easy to use, and it also does the link analysis plus the text analysis in LexURL Searcher, and it also gets data from YouTube, Flickr, and Technorati for various different things. Lots of different web metric analysis. And there's also issue crawler for link networks, and Google Touch Graph is another good one for very quick link networks. Okay, one of the kind of plus and minus points for webmetrics is because all the data is online from the web and the web doesn't have quality control, then there's always an issue of validity and there's always an issue of reliability. So the evidence isn't very strong ever for whatever you're studying. So this is a disadvantage when you're using it for academic research. So I recommend, if possible, using webmetrics in conjunction with other methods. So it works really well when it's used in conjunction with qualitative methods. So you do a study based on maybe virtual ethnography or interviews or questionnaires, and you also have some webmetrics, then it works really well because you get the diagrams and you get the overall big picture, plus you get the detailed analysis. And for students it's good because webmetrics projects are very simple to do, and you can let students learn how to do it and do it very quickly, and then there are all these validity and reliability issues, so the good students will really have to say a lot about the quality of the data and the reliability of the results, whereas the bad students will just take it at face value. So it's a good research-based exercise for students to get them to really understand the data. Okay, so I'm not going to mention coverage or sample bias, but they are issues. So in summary, the web contains loads of data or loads of information that's put there for various purposes, but particularly in Web 2.0, it can be exploited for social research purposes, many social research purposes, so social network sites, YouTube, or just the general web. So you can exploit it by just counting how often like a web pages mention terms, or drawing the link networks for hyperlinks between websites, or the YouTube diagrams, or the blog pulse graphs. So they're all fairly simple techniques, but I think they all have wide possibilities in social science research. So sorry for slightly going over 5 minutes, not so slightly, and thanks very much.